Some sentences are measured in years, others are measured in how long a human mind can hold together. In the United States, there are prisons where the official sentence on paper is no longer the real punishment. The real sentence begins after the gates close, when the environment itself becomes the mechanism of control. This is where survival stops being assumed. These facilities are not hidden. They are funded, regulated, and defended. They exist within the law, yet operate in ways that feel detached from it. Their purpose is rarely stated out loud, but it is understood internally: eliminate unpredictability at any cost, because unpredictability is treated as the enemy. From the outside, these prisons appear clinical and controlled: concrete walls, razor wire, watchtowers. The architecture projects order, but once inside, order gives way to something else: an atmosphere of constant tension, where every action is monitored, every movement constrained, and every moment stripped of privacy. The first thing that disappears is autonomy. New arrivals are processed quickly, clothing replaced, personal items confiscated, identity reduced to an identification number and classification label. Risk assessment determines everything that follows: housing, movement, communication, and in many cases, isolation. There is no adjustment period. In some of the worst facilities, prisoners are placed immediately into highly restrictive housing. Cells are narrow and reinforced. Doors are solid steel, often with small slots for food trays and minimal visibility. Natural light is scarce or intentionally obstructed. Time loses definition. Days follow identical routines. Lights turn on and off according to schedule, not circadian rhythm. Meals arrive through slots. Showers are infrequent and supervised. Exercise, if permitted, occurs alone in confined enclosures surrounded by concrete. Human interaction is minimized by design. Conversations are discouraged. Eye contact is avoided. Silence becomes the default, not because people choose it, but because the environment enforces it. In these prisons, silence is not peaceful. It is heavy. Every sound carries weight: a distant door slam, footsteps in the corridor, mechanical echo of locks engaging. Each noise signals authority, reminding those inside that control is absolute and constant. The psychological effect is immediate. Without stimulation, the mind turns inward. Thoughts loop. Memories replay. Anxiety builds without release. Small uncertainties feel enormous. The absence of information creates its own fear. What time is it? What day is it? How long has it been? These questions often go unanswered. And like lower security facilities, where programs and group activities provide structure, the worst prisons operate with minimal engagement. Education is limited or non-existent. Work assignments are rare. Group programs are viewed as security risks. Rehabilitation is not prioritized. Containment is. Officials often justify these conditions as necessary for safety, citing violence, gang activity, or disciplinary concerns, but once placed in these environments, individuals rarely move out of them. Classification becomes static, behavior that might otherwise be considered a response to stress withdrawal, agitation. Emotional volatility is interpreted as noncompliance. Requests for assistance are treated with suspicion. Complaints are documented, processed, and frequently denied. The system closes in on itself. Oversight exists in theory. Inspections occur. Reports are filed, but daily life inside these facilities remains largely invisible. External accountability is limited by restricted access and administrative language that sanitizes reality. Incidents become statistics. People become cases. For those inside, the message becomes clear quickly: endure quietly or risk further restriction. This is where the sentence begins to change. Because the punishment is no longer just confinement, it is exposure to an environment that systematically erodes mental stability, one that does not prepare anyone for return to society, because return is not the expectation. In these prisons, the future is intentionally undefined. Appeals move slowly. Reviews are infrequent. Progress is vague. The absence of milestones removes hope, not abruptly, but gradually. Hope fades not from despair, but from repetition, day after day, cell after cell, year after year. And this is only the beginning, because beyond this initial stage lies something far worse: facilities where isolation deepens, medical neglect becomes routine, and violence is normalized through inaction, places where the system no longer intervenes because it has already decided the outcome. By the time someone reaches the second phase of the worst American prisons, the goal is no longer adjustment, it is submission. This is where control stops being a tool and becomes the punishment itself, where every aspect of existence is engineered to remove resistance not through force alone, but through exhaustion. The architecture changes first. Cells grow smaller, corridors narrow, visibility decreases. In some facilities, windows are positioned to allow light without allowing view. You can tell it's daytime but you cannot see the sky. Night arrives the same way. Light switches off. Darkness fills the space. No sunset. No transition. Just on or off. Movement is reduced further. Doors open only when necessary. When they do, it is rarely without restraints, shackles, waist chains, handcuffs, often all three. Even compliance is treated as a risk. Prisoners are escorted everywhere, even to places a few feet away. A shower becomes a procedure. The medical visit becomes an operation. Every step is recorded. Every delay is punished. Time stretches differently here. Hours feel endless, yet years pass without markers. There are no holidays, no shared events, no group recognition of time passing. Birthdays go unnoticed. Seasons blur together. This isn't accidental. Removing temporal awareness weakens resistance. Without a sense of progress or countdown, the mind struggles to anchor itself. People stop planning, stop anticipating, stop imagining a future beyond the cell. That future is treated as irrelevant. Isolation deepens. And some of these prisons, individuals spend 20 to 24 hours a day alone, not for days, not for weeks, but for years. Sometimes decades. This is not disciplinary segregation. This is permanent housing. Cells are silent except for mechanical noise. There is no casual conversation, no human touch, no shared meals. Even voices echo strangely, distorted by concrete and distance. The absence becomes physical. People report feeling pressure in their chest, hanging in their ears, sensations of floating or sinking. The brain, deprived of input, begins to create its own. Hallucinations begin subtly. Shadows appear where nothing moves. Sounds emerge without source. Thoughts feel louder than reality. Over time, the line between internal and external blurs. This is not mental illness in the traditional sense. It is neurological response. The human brain evolved for interaction. When deprived of it, it adapts in ways that are often destructive. Anxiety becomes constant. Paranoia develops naturally. Emotional regulation collapses. Some people begin talking to themselves not out of madness, but necessity. Others stop speaking altogether. Sleep patterns disintegrate. Without natural light cues or daily variation, circadian rhythms fail. Insomnia becomes chronic. When sleep comes, it is shallow and fragmented. Dreams turn vivid. Nightmares repeat. Waking up provides no relief because the environment does not change. Medical care in these facilities is minimal and reactive. Requests are screened. Delays are common. Mental health treatment, when provided, often consists of medication administered through a slot in the door. No conversation, no therapy, no continuity. Symptoms are managed, not addressed. Worse, psychological distress is frequently reclassified as behavioral noncompliance. Emotional breakdowns are treated as disruptions. Self-harm is punished as rule violation. Help-seeking becomes dangerous. Some prisoners learn quickly to suppress visible distress. They become quiet, controlled, flat. This is often interpreted as improvement. In reality, it is shut down. Others cannot adapt. They pace endlessly within the confines of their cells. They knock on doors. They shout into the silence. These behaviors trigger disciplinary responses: further isolation, loss of privileges, extended confinement. The system reinforces itself. Violence, when it occurs, is often indirect. It comes through neglect, through delayed medical responses, through prolonged exposure to stress conditions known to cause harm. When physical violence does happen, it is swift and administrative. Extraction teams, restraint chairs, chemical agents. Force is clinical. There is paperwork afterward. Reports, reviews. Internal findings, rarely consequences. Oversight mechanisms exist, but they function slowly and distantly. Investigations take months or years. By the time conclusions are reached, the environment remains unchanged. The system does not correct itself, it absorbs criticism and continues. Family contact erodes further during this phase. Phone calls are brief and infrequent, often monitored, sometimes restricted entirely. Visits, if allowed, occur through thick glass or digital screens. Physical presence is denied. Loved ones age on the outside. Children grow up. Parents die. Inside, the cell remains the same. This separation creates a unique form of grief, mourning people who are still alive, while being alive yourself in a space that feels lifeless. Many prisoners stop making calls not because they don't care but because hearing about life continuing without them becomes unbearable. Hope becomes painful. Legal avenues narrow as well. Appeals slow. Representation becomes inconsistent. Some prisoners lose contact with attorneys entirely. Others exhaust options without resolution. The uncertainty becomes permanent. Not knowing if release is possible is often worse than knowing it is not, because uncertainty sustains anxiety indefinitely. In these prisons, even compliance does not guarantee relief. There is no clear metric for progress. Behavior reviews are subjective. Decisions are opaque. You can do everything right and still remain. That is the point. These facilities are not designed for movement. They are designed for stasis, for holding patterns without end. For many, this is where the identity fractures. People stop seeing themselves as participants in life. They become observers of time passing. They detach from their own emotions as a survival mechanism. Numbness replaces fear. Apathy replaces anger. From the outside, this can look like stability. Inside, it is erosion. And yet, this still is not the worst part. Because beyond control and isolation lies a deeper failure, places where neglect, aging, and systemic indifference converge, turning sentences into slow endings. Places where the system no longer even pretends to manage outcomes. That is where this story goes next. There comes a point in the worst American prisons where control is no longer the priority. Maintenance is. This is the stage where the system stops reacting and simply allows conditions to exist. Where people are not actively managed, rehabilitated, or even contained with purpose but warehoused. Time does not just pass, it accumulates. Prisoners grow old in cells never designed for aging bodies. Facilities built for young, physically able men now house people with failing eyesight, chronic pain, mobility issues, and untreated illnesses. Stairs become obstacles, bunks become hazards. Showers become dangerous. Medical care becomes a negotiation. Appointments are delayed or denied. Symptoms are minimized. Chronic conditions are treated with over-the-counter medication or ignored entirely. Specialists are rare. Preventative care is almost non-existent. Pain becomes routine. In many of these prisons, medical requests are filtered through security priorities. Movement requires staff availability. Staffing shortages mean care is postponed. Emergencies wait. Sometimes, they wait too long. Deaths are rarely dramatic. They are quiet. Heart failure, infections, complications from untreated conditions, collapses in cells that go unnoticed until count. These deaths are categorized efficiently. Natural causes. No further action. Families receive notifications days later. Details are limited. Questions are answered with procedure. There is no investigation because nothing is considered abnormal. This is the normalization of neglect. Mental health deterioration continues unchecked. Depression deepens. Cognitive decline accelerates. Long-term isolation combined with aging creates irreversible impairment. Memory fades. Language slows. Emotional responses flatten. Some prisoners forget dates. Others forget names. Some forget why they were sentenced at all. The environment does not adapt. Programs designed for rehabilitation do not exist here. Education is limited or unavailable. Work assignments, if offered, are menial and disconnected from skill development. There is no preparation for release because release is not expected, even when parole eligibility exists on paper. It rarely materializes in reality. Parole boards consider behavior, risk, and perceived readiness. Decades spent in isolation and neglect make positive evaluations unlikely. The system creates the condition and then punishes the result. Compassionate release policies exist, but thresholds are high. Terminal illness, extreme incapacity, even then. Approvals are rare and slow. Many die waiting for decisions that arrive too late. Violence in this stage is passive. It is the refusal to intervene, the acceptance of decline, the absence of urgency. Facilities continue to operate with reduced oversight. Media attention is minimal. The public assumes that extreme sentences justify extreme outcomes. The language shifts again. People are no longer described as prisoners. They become beds, numbers, costs. Budgets prioritize containment over care. Staffing shortages are treated as unavoidable. Conditions are framed as unfortunate but necessary. Responsibility dissolves. No individual appears accountable. Each failure is attributed to system limitations. Each death is an anomaly until they become routine. For those still conscious of time, the psychological weight intensifies. Knowing that survival does not lead to improvement, knowing that compliance does not lead to relief, knowing that aging will only make conditions worse, hope disappears not through loss, but through understanding. Family ties, if any, remain. Weaken further. Loved ones struggle to maintain contact with someone whose voice sounds increasingly distant, confused, or exhausted. Conversations shorten. Silence grows. Grief begins before death. For those who are eventually released, the damage is profound. Years of neglect leave lasting physical and psychological scars. Navigating freedom becomes nearly impossible without support. Many cycle back into the system not because of intent, but incapacity. Recidivism is treated as proof of failure. The context is ignored. These prisons are not broken systems. They are functioning as designed. They do not rehabilitate because rehabilitation is not the goal. They do not prepare people for return because return is not expected. They do not prevent harm because harm is tolerated. They exist to remove people from society indefinitely with minimal obligation beyond containment. And society accepts this because the consequences remain hidden. These facilities are remote. Their populations are voiceless. Their outcomes are abstract. As long as the suffering stays out of sight, the system persists. The question this leaves behind is uncomfortable. If punishment extends beyond the sentence, beyond the walls, beyond release, beyond life itself, what purpose does it serve? Because in the worst American prisons, the sentence does not end. It fades into paperwork, into memory, into silence. And that silence is not empty. It is filled with people the system chose to forget.